along with Will Anderson and Annette Newman, who is not able to be present. We represent Natasha Winkler. She is the mother of Lanaya Miller. Lanaya was one of the children that died in the pond on March 31st, 2016. I'm going to just give you a brief overview of what our independent investigation has uncovered. Mr. Anderson is going to go a little bit more into depth. Ms. Winkler is going to make a brief statement, and then we'll open it up for a few questions. So, as you guys know, that on March 31st, in the early hours of the morning, Lanaya Miller, along with Ashanti Butler and Dominique Battles, they lost their life in a pond over by Royal Palm Cemetery. And when Ms. Winkler came to me, I kind of briefly heard about it, and as I began to read the reports, I just saw this theme of just inconsistencies. And then Mr. Anderson and we went to the scene, and we saw that the story that the law enforcement officials were providing to the media and to the public really did not match the scene. And what was so interesting to me is that it seems that the initial story of how these girls allegedly stole a vehicle wasn't properly vetted. The gentleman that they allegedly stole the car from, his name may or may not be Damian Marriott. He went to a Walmart to purchase a TV. Our legal team went over to that Walmart. That Walmart's a neighborhood Walmart. It's not a Walmart that sells electronics. So the first part of that story of how this 36-year-old man was with children and how they allegedly stole a vehicle from him doesn't even pan out. And then there's this span of time, and then all of a sudden they see a vehicle. They see Lanaya and her friends in the vehicle at 3:30 in the morning up on Sunset Point Road. And then they spot them again, maybe on or about Drew Street, and then they spot them again at Almerton Road. However, at 4 a.m., they were in a pond. And the sheriff himself has said, well, they were evading police, but yet the lights weren't on, and they didn't know that they were being followed. Just as a criminal defense attorney, I have questions about that. Ms. Winkler, she has questions about how her daughter actually died. And Mr. Anderson is going to go a little bit more into depth even about the scene. But just know this, that the road in the cemetery curves to a sharp left, and yet the girls went into the pond at a sharp right. I'm not a physics major. I didn't go to school for physics, but I have common sense, and I know that directionally doesn't sound right. And ultimately, it seems that it was very convenient for law enforcement to put together a story, to manipulate a story about these girls' past and about what they may or may not have done. And in the case of Lanaya Miller, she had no criminal convictions. She was accused of stealing a vehicle, and those charges were dismissed. So whether it was dismissed by the state attorney's office or by a judge, those charges were dismissed. And what hasn't been reported about Lanaya is that because of her involvement with the criminal justice system, she wanted to become an attorney. She wanted to fight for kids that were in her position who were accused and maybe didn't have anyone to fight for them. But see, that hasn't been talked about. What's been talked about is their mugshots. What's been talked about is this criminal history. And that's the legacy that's been portrayed of Lanaya Miller, and that is an incorrect legacy. And, at this point, we're seeking answers for Lanaya's mother. She deserves answers. There's inconsistencies that need to be addressed, and we're asking for those answers to come. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Anderson to talk a little bit more about some of the inconsistencies our independent investigation has found.
Good afternoon. So I want to start by saying that, in my opinion, this has been a rush to judgment. In my opinion, this has been a smear campaign. Let's look at the facts that we do know. By the time that the Sheriff's Office conducted their press release, they already had a poster board made up with Lanaya Miller's mugshot. They also listed under it her quote-unquote criminal history of a grand theft motor vehicle, which, as Ms. Whitfield has pointed out to you, no charges were ever pursued with that. That case was dismissed. Also, I've noted that in several reports, the sheriff is purportedly quoted as saying that these girls had eight thefts between them. It also has been reported that the sheriff said that these girls had a long criminal history. Again, that's not true about Ms. Miller, but no one's talking about this. Ms. Whitfield talked about several of the inconsistencies. I wanted to point out that we've done our own investigation. We're continuing that investigation. And at least as recently as last Friday, we've been to the Walmart to try to find out if there is any video. And the general manager of that Walmart informed us that law enforcement's not even requested that video. We also went to the St. Police Department to get any reports any 911 calls that we could get. So far, they've declined to turn over anything to us, as has the sheriff's office. Most interestingly, when we went to St. Pete Police Department, their records department, we met with a woman at the counter and with a supervisor. They informed us that St. Pete Police Department is quote unquote not involved in this at all. However, we saw not less than a day later, the chief of police at St. Pete Police Department was giving a press conference about this very case. So our question is, which is it? There are further inconsistencies. The sheriff was reported in one news report as saying, one sentence right after the other. One sentence he says the girls were evading police. The very next sentence he goes on to say, we weren't chasing them. We didn't have our lights or siren activated. Well, which is it? You can't evade someone who's not chasing you. And again, I want to re-emphasize, this was allegedly an unmarked police vehicle, no lights and sirens, and I encourage all of you as journalists to follow up on this, ask questions, ask the critical questions, do as we did and go out to this cemetery at night. It's nearly zero visibility. And ask yourself, do the facts match what we've been told so far? Or is this, as I believe, a rush to judgment and quite possibly a smear campaign? All we've heard about these young ladies, about these children, are the negatives. For example, why has no one questioned the owner of this car? And as Ms. Whitfield stated, what business does a 36-year-old man have with 3 children at 8 p.m.?
Now we're going to hear from Natasha Winkler. She is Lania's